It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview Pete Caliendo, the owner of Baseball Outside the Box podcast. How are you doing today?
Brandon, I am doing great. Hope you are too, and I look forward to this. This can be a lot of fun.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start a baseball podcast?
Yeah, interesting, because I've been coaching baseball in the coaching business for over 39 years. And, about maybe, I want to say about 4 or 5 years ago, I was taking one of our teams internationally, to compete culturally, have some fun, and experience international baseball. And I was talking to one of the dads, and I mentioned to them, it'd be interesting to do a podcast, because I love educating coaches, players, and parents. And, it would be great to have a show where you could have great guests, guests from in the U.S. around the, as I was talking to him, he says that he owns a podcast company. I said, "Oh, wow, this is perfect," because I didn't know anything about podcasts. I'm like, okay, I'd love to get started. So that's how it kind of got started. But the reason for it was because I did a lot of coaching seminars in the U.S. and around the world, always helping volunteer coaches anywhere, or even higher level coaches. And I wanted to have another avenue to be able to do that where they can listen on their own time. And this was a great opportunity. So that's kind of how it got started.
How did you come up with the name of your podcast, Baseball Outside the Box?
Yeah, that was interesting too, because, for years, when I started coaching, it was the way it was done. You listen to the coach, whatever they told you, you did. Well, a lot of times that may not always be the best way. And sometimes you have to always ask the question, why? And that's not just in baseball, that's in life in general. You have to be polite, you have to be respectful, but you do have to question sometimes what you're doing to see if it is the best way to do it. And we found that there were a lot of other better ways to do things. And sometimes you have to think outside the box. It was another name, but then I didn't realize that the American Baseball Coaches Association, great friends of mine, they had a magazine with that name. So I had to switch the name, and I switched to the Baseball Outside the Box. So it's kind of about the outside the box thinking when it comes to coaching, when it comes to developing players in the game.
What do you cover on your baseball podcast?
Boy, we try to cover it all, but we look at the topics that are most important in the development of a young person's long-term baseball development. If they're going to enjoy the game, they've got to enjoy it right away and continue to enjoy it throughout their whole life. So they get their specific fundamental, but also as a game. And we look at also other sports. So that way we can learn from other sports. We don't know, sometimes I'll bring in, hockey coaches, soccer coaches, coaches from all over the world that maybe are either in another sport or in baseball, because we learn from others. So there's a lot of different topics that we try to address to make sure that, we can help our coaches, players, and parents.
Of course, with you saying that you cover multiple sports too, do you, even though you're a baseball strictly podcast, do you also cover softball, as softball is similar to baseball?
Absolutely. We've had Matt Lyle, who's been on the show before. He actually a baseball softball coach. We've had softball coaches on the show because of the fact that you can learn a lot from softball, especially with a smaller playing field, how fast the game is, how to react. There's a lot of things you can learn from softball. I'll tell you what, I've attended several softball conferences along with baseball, and I love the softball conferences because talk about outside the box thinkers. There's a lot of them in the softball industry, but not just softball. We talk about New Zealand, we talk about the All Blacks, have a great system of coaching, when it comes to rugby, one of the best in the world. Talk about soccer. Some of the, European soccer teams have some great coaches. So I kind of look to that avenue to bring in different things into the game of baseball.
Who are some of the people that you have interviewed?
Yeah, I've been lucky. Lots. I've got over 300 shows, I think, in the last 3 years. We also have over 200, I believe, on YouTube. Um, you know, we have the whole gamut. Look at the major league level, guys like Tony La Russa, Clint Hurdle, outstanding people, outstanding managers and coaches. Go to the mental game, Ken Ravizza, who was with the Chicago Cubs, rest in peace, the godfather of the mental game. Then continue on, to general managers like, Ned Colletti with the Dodgers. We'll talk about Dan Duquette with the Orioles. These are great minds. We look at high school coaches, college coaches. We even bring in, some volunteer coaches, because again, I believe you can learn from all levels of the game, not just the highest level. The highest level is there, but that doesn't mean the highest level knows the most. There's some great coaches at the young levels, and I love to bring in new personalities, coaches that sometimes people don't know, because, we're always looking for the person everybody knows. But what about the people that nobody knows about that are really good, that I've worked with personally? I know how good they are, and I love to give young people that platform, that opportunity to showcase themselves and give their ideas and show why they're really good and will become some really top coaches in the future.
How do you go about getting some of the people that you've had on your show?
Well, again, luck there, Brandon, because being in the game 39 years, I've got to know a lot of people. If you stay in something long enough, you do things honestly, you're fair to people, you treat people good, you make a lot of friends in the game. And those friends not only are good coaches or experts in the game, because, we're talking about special experts when it comes to athletic development, possibly, developing the body, the quickness and all that. And with those friends, you can ask them, can you put me in contact with so-and-so? Would love to have them on the show. First, I obviously have them on the show. And then once I've got them on the show, I also ask them, how can you help me out? I'm like you, I also go on social media, right? Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name them. And I see certain guys on there that maybe even, are part of our platform that I don't know. I'll send them a message. I'll tell them, listen, I got a baseball podcast. It's to help educate coaches, players, and parents. Love to have you on. I know your time's limited. Shoot me an email or drop me a message. I'll have all the details to you, and I'll stay on them, just like you. I'll stay on them as long as possible. I don't bug them, but I stay on them because I know they're busy. And hopefully they'll join the show. And then when they do, I think they have a pretty good time on the show.
What are some of the segments that you have on your podcast?
It varies again, but it could be, how to run a successful, fun, organized practice that transfers into real game situations. It could be, pitching development, the understanding the effective velocity, which means pitching in and out, up and down, different speeds, or tunneling, which means, releasing the ball at the same spot. So that way they don't know if it's a curveball, fastball, or slider at the same time. Again, nutrition is so important. So we'll identify top nutritional experts and let our kids understand how important nutrition is. Athletic development, moving your feet. How do you do that? How do you work on getting stronger, quicker, faster? What do you do if you fail at baseball, at a skill, right? Because baseball is a game where you fail a lot, Brandon, right? I mean, you fail, unfortunately, more than more sports. Actually, you're interviewing in all sports. But baseball is the one where 7 out of 10 times when you're a hitter, you fail, and you're the most successful hitter in the world. So most of the time you're failing 8 out of 10 times, and a pitcher's also failing, a defensive failing. So what do you do? How do you deal with that failure? That's important to understand for really young kids. So that way they can progress faster to the higher ranks and understand that. So there's many skills, and we continue to add the different things because we always ask our audience, which is located in the U.S. and over 100 countries, also on ESPN, Honolulu. We continue to ask them, what are you looking for as a coach? What do you want to learn more about as a coach? So we're getting input for our audience also.
How has your experience in your past helped you with your podcast experience?
Well, I think my coaching experience, my teaching experience in the game, starting at Mickey Young Baseball School when I was 15, become a coach at 17, director of instruction at 21, and then, Team USA coach. And just a lot of things happened in my life because I stayed with it, and I had good people, mentors who helped me out so much. Because of that, you know, that gives me a lot of insight into the game. So when I'm looking for somebody particular to bring on the show, obviously I've listened to them either on podcast, I've coached with them, I've watched them on television, I've listened to what they said. When I get on with them, I believe that I can talk with the best in the business when it comes to developing young players. I can question things. I can ask, is there a better way? Why are you doing it that way? Isn't this better? So, I think they like that because, being a baseball coach that long, I understand where they're coming from. So I think that gives me an insight in all that.
As you talked about ESPN and stuff, is your podcast on ESPN?
It's on ESPN Honolulu's website. It's one of the, I think, 6 or 7 talk shows there, which I'm very proud of. And I hope to be able to expand on that. But one step at a time. I'm fortunate to have them, be on their excuse me, website. So if you go to ESPN Honolulu, Google it, and you'll see my podcast on their website. Every day or every other day, there's a show.
What is something that you learn now that you didn't know before starting a podcast?
Yeah, probably how hard it is and how much work it takes. Right? It's not just about sit back and talk. It's not that easy, right? Because you got to do your homework. You got to know the person you're talking to. You got to know. I'm not one to script the show, so I normally don't send questions to the person I'm interviewing. I love to be a little bit more natural. I don't know. I think it's because it's just my background. It's the way I grew up, kind of instinctively. But I do my homework. I find out more about the person. A lot of times I'm lucky because I already know a lot about the person. But if I don't, I do my homework. Probably not as good as I should. So that's one of the hardest things is all the work, and this better than anybody, all the work it takes, one, to prepare for the show, two, to understand what you're going to ask and how you're going to ask it, and three, to make it flow, because that's not easy either, right? To make the conversation go, that's tough. So that's been an eye opener for me because I thought it was going to be a lot easier, but it's been tough. And one thing I do is I listen to a lot of guys on television, and I listen the way they do interviews and the way they ask questions, and I try to learn from them. I'm also listening to a lot of podcasts myself. I've listened, now I'm going to listen to yours because, now I know where your podcast is, but I listen to a lot of podcasts, again, to educate myself, but also to learn more about what hosts are doing and how they're asking questions.
That's amazing. What are some of your future plans for your podcast out of the box?
Well, one plan is to continue to do as many shows as possible. We all have other jobs, as you know. This is not a full-time job right now. So our goal is continue to do them every other day or every day if possible. The other goal is to widen the audience. I'm lucky to have an audience in 100 countries in the baseball industry because I do a lot of seminars worldwide and I've got to know a lot of people worldwide. But I want to expand the audience in the U.S., just like we did with ESPN Honolulu. I hope to be able to expand that ESPN to other avenues, other states in the U.S., and hopefully one day have a goal where it's on nationally. The podcast is on to help coaches, again, players and parents, help all three where they can actually get on the show, maybe even live, and ask questions and be able to ask the interviewer questions, but also be able to ask myself questions.
That's amazing. What advice would you give somebody looking to start a sports podcast and a baseball podcast?
Well, first of all, a podcast in general, if you're technologically savvy, do it yourself, get it on, all the major networks yourself, because eventually if you become big enough and you're making money, now it's your company, it's your business, and somebody else doesn't have a cut of the pie. And once they have the cut of the pie, a lot of times they also have a say so. So I think if you can do it technology wise yourself, do it yourself. Marketing wise, that's a tough one. Marketing the show is probably one of the hardest things to do. So educate yourself on the marketing aspect, how to get the show out, how to educate people. The other aspect would be, what what's your niche, or who do you want to reach? Who do you want to interview, and why? What's your purpose? It should be a passion of yours, I believe, because I think if it's a passion of something that you want to do, you're going to do it much better than if it's just something you're going to do just to do it. So I think those are some of the areas. If you're going to start a podcast, try to organize yourself in that manner and do this, get it going. Because one of the things most people do, Brandon, I believe, including myself, anything in life, we do this a lot of times. We wait. Oh, I got to make it better. Or I got to do this. I'm not ready. No, get going. I've listened to Joe Rogan, who's with the most successful podcast in the world, the most biggest audience. He had a name, but he started with nothing. He started talking. He didn't know what to do. He just started talking, having interviews. He just kept going. He stuck with it. Yes, he had maybe a little bit of planning, and you want to organize and plan, but don't hem and hog and try to be perfect to get started. Get started, get going, and you'll have a lot of fun doing, because that's how you even get better. I never interviewed people before, so I had to start. And you may not want to start with some big names, interviewing them right away. You may want to start with some friends, interview them, because it's going to take time to get the flow and understanding how to really do this. And I'm far from understanding how to do it, but at least after 200-300 podcasts, I'm a little bit better than when I started with my first one.
That's amazing. Where can my listeners find Baseball Out of the Box at on social media and podcast platforms?
Yeah, folks, check us out. BaseballOutsideTheBox.com. That's where the audio is. The YouTube, go to Peter Caliendo. If you know the comedian Frank Caliendo, name spelled the same. Caliendo's the last name. So go to YouTube, because we're all live on YouTube. Those are the major two platforms. You go to ESPN Honolulu, obviously. If you're in Hawaii, I think that would be great. Do us a favor, subscribe, like you do to Brandon's podcast. Subscribe to the show, because you're helping all of us when you subscribe, folks. You're just helping get the show out. You're doing us a favor. We're doing it for free. So help us out. I think that would be great. Check us out on Twitter, Baseball Out. I put a lot of baseball stuff on there, educational stuff, videos especially. I'm on Facebook, Peter Caliendo, LinkedIn, Peter Caliendo, and also Instagram, Brandon. I'm there too.
Thank you again, Peter Caliendo, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with the Baseball Out of the Box podcast.
Brandon, thank you, man, and continue a great job doing your show, man. Love it, and look forward to start listening to it every day.
Thank you. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Peter Caliendo, for your interview, and best of luck.
Thank you, Brandon.
It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.